The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just some housekeeping items. We will be sending the deck at the end of the webinar and, of course, taking some of your questions. Today's webinar is brought to you by Quintly. I want to thank you again for this opportunity and introduce to you Alex Gonsalves and his new book, Social Media Analytics Strategy. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Zach. It's really great to be here. It's overwhelming, the good responses on the book, and it's great to be sharing a little bit more on what the book is all about with everyone.
This is truly exciting for me. I love the book. For our audience out there, can you give us a little background, to who Alex Gonsalves is?
Sure. So I've been looking into social for over 10 years, including my years in university, and then 6+ years I've been working actually in social media analytics. I'm listing here just some clients that I've worked with from the vendor side, and I've been following projects of every size with companies that are on every stage of their analytics evolution, let's say. And I've been learning a lot throughout these years. And the idea is that I'm, bringing all these learnings and all these insights into this one book, and then we can actually understand how the industry is looking at this and how the industry is moving. So it's basically a share of my experience so far with lots of cases that do have a lot of overlap with each other. So people are having the same kinds of problems and facing the same kinds of paths to reach the solutions. So the book kind of brings it all together and gives a view of what are we expecting to happen ahead, and how to get to this ideal social media analytics strategy.
Excellent. So tell me, Alex, why this book? What was the aha moment for you to actually sit down and write this awesome book? Did you discover that need? How did you discover the need, of course, and why did you write it?
So yeah, that's a great question, because what really happens is we do have a common problem that we are facing as professionals, companies in the industry, and these are problems that are very relevant today, especially today because we are moving strongly into a data-driven kind of workflow with our organizations. But it's also something that is not going to go away anytime soon. So as soon as we can learn about this and get our heads around this, we can move ahead and we can start implementing some solutions into our organizations and really making things better for us. And by doing that, we're going to help the entire community get ahead with us as well. I think the problems really start with us, the professionals. We come from diverse backgrounds, and we jump into social media from every kind of background. Sometimes we're new to analytics, and we might be inexperienced with a full analytics strategic workflow, right? So maybe we even know how to use a tool and we reach certain metrics, but then it kind of ends there. Right, it's very rare that we have a chance within our organizations to really implement like a continuous improvement cycle where we can, count on analytics to be always there and giving us, always these insights where we get better and better and better and better. So of course, this is hard for many reasons. We have lots of pressure as professionals for immediate results, and that doesn't give us a lot of time to learn and build up what we need. And then we have less than ideal resources and all of that. So the second problem, I think, that the makes the book relevant would be the social networks themselves, right? In this case, the social networks, they limit a lot on the capabilities of what we can do. So sometimes we have lots of even creative ideas on our side as analysts, as managers in our organizations, but we will be limited sometimes by the amount of data that these social networks are giving us. Even though it's important to point out that social does offer a very unique data set where we are seeing a lot of competitive information easily available, readily available, and that's kind of new for analytics, for business analytics in general. So it's actually also really exciting to work with social media, but there are some limitations, some problems, and we need to get our head around how to deal with these social networks. So that's eventually the second part of the problem. And then the third part is the organizations themselves. So the companies, they usually have a hard time to move into new kinds of uh, workflows and structures, and we're seeing this happen in every industry with companies of every size. So there's usually a lack of integration of data. There's a lack of integration between processes in the organization. Sometimes teams don't talk to each other. The team talks to the boss talks to the other boss from the other department who talks to his team, blah blah blah, and things are slow and they don't move. Companies don't store their own data, and then they end services with a provider, and then they're like looking for historical data, which they could have if they were storing their data. So there's lots of things going on the organization and company side, which the book does tackle and helps us to get those insights, bring it back to our organization, and help things get better structured and help things move into the future. And of course, adding all these problems up, what do we have? We have a lot of work ahead, right? So I think listing just some simple points that we can think about when dealing with these problems is basically start by identifying resources, mapping our data, integrating processes, training and preparing our team. And then, of course, the book comes in there to kind of be this, branch of knowledge where we, can share this knowledge and really kind of get together and get on the same page in the conversation and move ahead together.
Alex, I would like to ask, since I see it here on the slide, what are your thoughts on organic versus paid? I hear a lot of people saying organic is slow, it's a tough process, and lack of resources just are the biggest headache of all our professionals out there that are in marketing.
That's a really, really interesting question. It's a ongoing debate, and when we meet people everywhere, I think the question is, of course, social media networks, they will be doing their best to try to get the most money out of the structure that they're building, right? So they're going to try to pull everyone into the most possible paid kind of environment. But as companies and as professionals that are using these social networks, there are strategies to eventually, in the long term, build a very solid organic strategy, right? So we will, of course, have paid as one of the, let's say, parts of our strategy as a tool, sort of say, into our broader strategy. So, by training our professionals, integrating our data, we can eventually get to a point where we build a true community around our businesses and around our companies. There's one guest in the book that talks a lot about that. And it's really interesting. They have cases with global companies where they are building this kind of true relationship between the community and the companies, and social is a part of that, and paid is a part of that. So sometimes people see paid as the end goal, but it can be really just one part of the strategy.
Exactly. So how can we tackle that down to a perfect analytical strategy for the organization? How can we really harness this from the book itself?
So I chose to kind of blow up the cover there because the book really does follow the title to the point there. So it does kind of jump into social media details, right? So we really try to identify what is very specific about social media. Then, of course, we jump into analytics and what is analytics all about? Where are we going with this? How we're transforming data into insights, and how do we do that? And then, of course, the strategy part. How do we implement the whole thing in an organization, and how we make things work on an ongoing basis, and how we can really kind of make this a living part of our growth in our companies. So essentially, the book tackles these three topics, and of course, if we think also about who benefits from this book, we do have a large range of professionals that would benefit, even from people that are just kind of starting and getting into it, from people that are more focused on the creative side, to people that are very much into crunching the data, being, analysts to top decision makers and really strategic thinkers in the
So this
organization.
is really not just for the C-suites, right?
No, not at all. It does benefit, all levels. The strategic level, the C-suites, they really benefit from the book because they can relate to the rest of their team, and the analysts can relate to the creatives. The creatives can relate to the C-suites. So it kind of brings everyone together. That's one of the main goals here of the book, is to be able to start this conversation between these different people and these different levels within organizations that sometimes don't talk as much as they could. Like sometimes if they talked a little more and if they got together a little more to plan things together, they would probably have better outcomes, better outputs, better strategies, from those conversations.
That's awesome. So this is interesting. I love the title, right? A journey into analytics in social media. Why did you name it a journey?
So that's actually a really interesting point. The word journey came from my editor when she reviewed the first chapter of the book and she approved the first chapter of the book. She got back to me and she said, Alex, this is really good. I'd love to follow this journey that you're taking us into social media analytics. So that was really interesting, and that made me think, see the book from a different angle. And I really saw that I was actually building this journey to the reader, and from understanding basic points on all of these steps, until really kind of wrap everything in the end, and have this full view of what it is to build a strategic analytics workflow within the organization, and think strategically about the use of analytics and being data driven. So the word journey came into play here, and to kind of guide us, I think, through this next part, where we're going to tackle a little more the key concepts of the book, and to take us on this journey. I thought nothing better than, of course, a rocket these days, right? These days we're all about rockets, and why not call it Social X, right? So we built, so we built
That's
our little
awesome.
rocket. We have Social X ready to go, and we're going to a destination. Let's call it results, right? So we're trying to get to results with analytics.
Or better, Alex, let's call it Mars.
Right? Yeah. Who knows if there are good results in Mars, right? Let's think about that for a second. But here, thinking about, us reaching these results, and with our little rocket or Social X, we kind of launch off into a first part of the book, I guess, where we really, look into what's unique about social media, and we really, kind of get the concept of data, very well established. It does seem like a simple thing, especially for us that are dealing with data all the time, and we're absolutely sure that, yeah, I know what's data. But then when it comes to analytics, sometimes we have expectations. We want certain data, and the data is not there. We don't understand why it's not there. So the book goes into these details and really tries to explain to us why certain data is there, why certain data is not there, how, what can we expect, what's going to change, what's probably not going to change, and that kind of thing. So when we get everyone in this kind of same page there of data and the unique aspects of social, then we can jump into the second part of the process. And then the second part starts really tackling the analytics process itself. And so here, from
I do have a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I cut off there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so sorry about that, guys. What do you mean when you say data into metrics? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting point, because when we look at metrics sometimes, and we get analytics tools, and we do have all sorts of analytics tools everywhere, not only in social media, we usually bump directly into, for example, the metrics, and then we don't see what's behind it. We don't understand what exactly are the data sources that are getting coming together to be part of those metrics that we are working with. So the process of shaping data into metrics is something that is getting more and more accessible with the tools that we have right now. So, Quintly, that is bringing us, presenting the webinar here with us, where I work. We are really into this kind of flexibility aspect of shaping the data into metrics. But on top of the kind of very technical point of shaping the data into metrics, there is another aspect about metrics themselves that is interesting, and the book tries to explore it a lot, which is how metrics actually bring a new light into certain events, right? That's what metrics are really trying to do in many cases, and sometimes we can't see through the metric to really see what's behind that metric. What events is that metric trying to show us and tell us? And so what is happening is that we're kind of not having that connection. So the book tries to create that connection, and there are lots of parts actually in the book where we get out of this kind of technical talk and we go more into a kind of creative side, let's say, of how to look at metrics, how to see things in a different way, and then also, like, in that sense, I added here, I have a little interlude for us in that sense, which there is a link. Everyone's going to get this after the presentation. You can watch this video, and it's a great video on a movie that I really like, and they actually add analytics metrics to the screenplay, right? So the character is there, the narrator is telling us something about the character, and metrics are just popping up on the screen, and they give us a completely different view of that character. The cool thing when we're watching that scene is to think about, like, okay, if I just saw those metrics, would I have a view of that character, in the way I'm seeing in the screenplay? And then another way of thinking about it is, if I just saw that screenplay without those metrics, would I have the same view of that character? How do the metrics affect my interpretation of that screenplay? So that's a really cool.
So at the
little
end
thing.
of the day, really, Alex, you can agree with me that dashboard building is very, very important.
Yes, definitely it is. But
Because you would not track those metrics if you don't have the proper dashboard built to see those key insights, correct?
yes, that's absolutely correct. And then, of course, before you get to that point, if you do understand, the like we're talking about journey, you understand the journey until you get to that point where you're building a dashboard and you're putting a lot of things together. Then you'll be really, let's say, fluent in that kind of relationship between you and the dashboard. So you'll be faster on finding the insights. You'll be quicker on detecting anomalies and things like that.
So what you're saying, first start dating before you get married.
Exactly. That's the whole idea. And that's like the the first part of the book is kind of the whole, getting to know you kind of part before we start, like the analytics process is more going towards the getting married part of the analogy, I guess. And yeah, and then so the second part of the analytics process, which is important as well, is the choice of tools, the setup of tools, and then we have a second quick interlude here into that, and yeah.
And
So
this is really interesting module you have here. Reading through the book, I think it was chapter 5, you were talking about dedicated and hybrid tools, the advantage and the disadvantage of those tools. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
yeah, I think that's a very, very important point. And what we're seeing here, just so you guys understand what we're seeing, and then you can, figure this out while we're talking. We're seeing a modular approach, which is basically a collection of dedicated tools performing their specific functions in our bigger analytics setup. Right, I am a big advocate of this kind of setup, but the main difference there is that usually a dedicated tool will be, tend to offer more in their specific field, right? So if you get a tool that just does analytics, another tool that just does listening, another tool that just does web analytics, ads, social publishing, metrics as well, right? So we can bring all of this together in a modular way, which is good for many reasons, and just to name a few, if something happens with any of these modules that we're working with, it's much easier for us to kind of get rid of it and bring in a new module. Of course, all these changes that we will have in our setup, it's always going to be a little bit of a hassle anyway. But if we have a hybrid tool that is doing everything for us and something happens with that tool, we basically have to change our entire process because we're entirely relying on this one vendor that is doing this collection of things themselves. So I'm a big advocate of having these independent modules, very dedicated, and I can also be sure that these guys are probably going to continue doing more of what they already do, right? So I know the social analytics tool I'm using is going to get even better in social analytics. The listening is going to get even better at listening, etc. Right? So I can expect from them more in that specific field. So I can know that if when I build this setup, I'm going to really get better and better and better going into the future, into the long term. Then I added some 2 points here, like the data integration. Some organizations don't do a lot of that and have like different teams accessing different tools without talking to each other, without seeing everything. So we see people in social media not seeing web metrics, not seeing sales metrics, salespeople not seeing social media metrics, and all of that. So is data integration really optional or not, right? So I think not. But this is one point to leave open there for us to think about. And then of course the question of data storage. Should we keep our own data as an organization? I would definitely vote that we should. We should somehow store it, even if we are relying on these tools. While we are working, we can always do backups of the data and store that data ourselves. Because later, if we change tools, if we change modules, we can always load past data, load historical data, and we have.
That's right, and we're not locked down into one specific vendor.
Exactly. That's the whole idea there.
So I heard you're giving one copy of the book today to a lucky audience member. Is that true?
That is correct. That is correct. We're excited to have a draft from the people, from all you guys attending to the webinar today. We're going to draft one book, and we're going to send it to the winner later. I'm gonna ask the winner if I can, announce that he or she was the winner, and then we'll be announcing that. I think early next week once we do the draft and we get back to all of you guys after the webinar.
And you're in Vegas, right?
Yeah, right now I'm in fabulous Las Vegas, and it's a great city actually too. And I'm actually in a neighborhood called Paradise, so we have a little.
Wow.
So I'm actually doing the webinar from Paradise, right? That's interesting.
You're quite the lucky guy.
Yeah, I guess. So
I like what you're focusing on here. You're saying the analyst mindset.
Yes.
What does that look like really?
So that's actually a great point, and the analyst mindset is something that throughout the book I'm going to touch that in many ways, because one of the main things I want to help people that read the book, and actually I want to bring people together around that conversation, is that people can really think in the way that an analyst thinks, without kind of the distance that we usually have when we see the word analyst in front of us. So we're always like scared. Oh, I'm not an analyst. I don't even like math, for example. Some people, I have heard that in the past, right? So it's like, that's not what it's about, right? Being an analyst is not about liking or not liking math. It's really about having this curious mindset, this curiosity, where you just keep asking the questions and you keep asking and keep asking. I added also an interlude here about that. There's another video that you guys can watch later. It is about a certain consulting detective that I'm not going to say who it is, but which is a great analyst, right? He's a great analyst, and he's a great inspiration for this kind of idea, for the analyst mindset. Because when we look at metrics, we look at dashboards, we're dealing with our real world problems. We want to grow our companies, we want to sell more, we want to grow our communities. All these are real problems that we have lots of questions, and sometimes analytics will bring us some results and certain insights, and those insights will have more questions related to them, right? So we'll have like, oh, okay, this is cool, but then if this is this, then I should ask why and why and why, and keep going.
Alex, if we know each other for a very long time, and I like to pick your brain. Would you say that today's marketing leaders should ask more whys rather than the hows?
I do agree. I fully agree with that. I think that what's happening is mainly the reason why I think maybe a lot of leaders are asking hows instead of whys, especially related to marketing and this kind of like content community relations and this kind of side of the businesses is maybe because they are slightly disconnected from the people who actually have the task of structuring this workflow of bringing the data together, getting everything together, getting the reports out, getting the story out, and being able to tell them what's going on. So I think they might be asking how right now because they are not there yet. As soon as an analytics strategy is made and they are seeing the insights and they are getting all of what they need, then they will shift into the whys and they will participate with from their high level strategic perspective into asking more of the whys. So I think we're kind of on the way to getting those guys there, but I think the reason why they are not there is
But
that
it's also that big debate between paid and organic, right? Should we do paid? Why should we do paid versus why should we focus on organic growth, right?
yeah, I agree. I perfectly agree because historically we've been doing advertising and we're comfortable with that. Companies understand that. Okay, I spend money in advertising, whatever kind of advertising I do, and then I get results from that, and I measure as the best I can. Sometimes I can't if I'm doing like TV or some channels. It's really hard to measure what I'm getting back from that. But I'm always trying that, but it's always been a little confusing. And in this new data-driven kind of environment, it's getting less and less and less confusing. But lots of people in this high level kind of strategic management, they still don't really understand how much is available out down, let's call it down here, right? So as soon as we can bring this to light and show them, hey, we can already see this, we can already see that, and then they can understand, okay, this is working, this is not working, and then they can think, okay, if this is not working, we should do something different, and then start going into that kind of idea of eventually building a community around the brand, being more creative about how to promote yourself to the market, understanding better what exactly your customer needs, and all of that very cool stuff that we all really want to do, but we sometimes get stuck in the process of not being able to measure what we are doing and not being able to get past the kind of clutter of confusion in a sense, right? So I think that's kind of
Right.
what's
Yeah, Alex, I do have a question to ask you, and it actually comes from Terry. And Terry says, with so much of their engagement driven by paid and by dark posts in particular, is it possible to benchmark how, and now, given so much of their data is hidden by platforms?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. We do always face limitations, right? There will be always some kind of limitation there. But the idea when we face certain limitations, like for example, insights that we want to find out, and eventually a platform is not giving us, or a social network is not giving us, we have to try to somehow get a work around these things, and these workarounds will eventually. Be finding a new provider of analytics, for example, that could have that data. But if eventually that data is not available at all, depending on what exactly we're looking for, we can be creative ourselves and try to bring people into our own kind of environment where we can really understand what's going on. So there are ways to get there. It's just a matter of how you shape your strategy towards that, and eventually, if you are relying a lot in paid, it does have to work for you, right? So if you're just paying because everyone is paying, that should not be your strategy. You should really be paying because you see the results from that paid strategy, right? It's cool to follow these kind of trends, like, okay, it's paid or nothing, blah blah blah. It's really interesting to listen to these things, but when it comes to the day-to-day work, we really got to focus on what we do, right? So I'm spending this much, I'm getting this back from this. It doesn't matter right now what my competitor is doing, because right now I'm checking my own personal strategy here. Once I'm done with this, then I can go ahead and look again. Okay, is everyone paid or not? I have seen lots of cases by using analytics that many companies do get a lot of organic. They have very different business strategies behind that. So maybe that is something to think about as well. Think about the business strategy, the model, how to go to market, and things like that as well. So if we're doing what
And that
everyone is,
also relates, of course, to your part one of your strategy, which is really the goal setting and monitoring these activities, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So when we're reaching these results, we really have to know what they are, and our particular results. You're exactly right. It's totally going in that direction, and we have to understand the practical implications of results, right? How is it affecting the business? And of course, from there, we want to have a very effective reporting structure. We want people that need to know, knowing of everything, just so we can eventually create this journey back, right? So we're kind of closing the cycle now, and the last part of the cycle is the feedback on the strategy, where the team plays a huge role, because people need to be active there. They need to be really digging for those insights, really making sure that the next person in the line understands what they have seen. I've seen lots of times. I've spoken, for example, with people in very creative positions, that they get reports from people sitting in an analytics team. They don't really understand the reports, but they don't really get back to those guys because they're so busy, and then they don't really know how to take database decisions. So I had these
And
kinds
it's
of folks.
really that disconnect that does not drive that organizational
Yeah.
flow and objectives, right?
That's exactly right. And then so because ultimately, and then we finally landed our social X perfectly there, of course. The success idea is really about effective improvement cycle, right? So it's not about insights. Many times when we talk analytics, people are like, yeah, I found an insight, it's great success. Insight is a success, but it's not really the success, right? The success is when you can really
Right.
implement
They
a long
say
term.
right, and they say you should look at the conversion of the insight.
Yeah, and then keep going. You get the conversion from the inside, and then what else? Like, are you keeping that? If the conversion means the purchase, are you keeping that person in your system? Do you know what else they're doing, how often they're coming? And you keep all that information rolling in your system, and you really understand the behavior of your community, the ecosystem around your business, and then of course the competitive landscape and all of that. But you really need that kind of cycle.
I know you used the rocket here, Social X, right?
Hmm.
But for our viewers, that this is really not rocket science. It's just really structured way to implement these strategies into your organization. Really structured way to enhance that workflow and of course speak to the stakeholders.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not rocket science at all. The language in the book is really non-technical. I try to be as non-technical as I can. Of course, there are technical terms in there, but those are very clear, very easy to understand. The whole book will have this non-technical, non-rocket science kind of conversation, so we can really like get out of this idea that things are too technical, too hard for me, and things like that. It's really inclusive. People can really come together and grow together from there. So that's what it's really all about.
That's awesome. So in the book, you share a lot of insights. You share a lot of thought leadership surrounding topics of processes, data, insights, analytics, implementation. Do you want to share with us some key takeaways from all the guests that you brought into the book?
Yeah, so the idea of bringing guests was twofold. First, I felt that it would be really interesting to look for the highest specialists, leaders I could find in each of the relevant fields that the book tackles. And then the second part of the idea of bringing guests was because I am a big fan of these guys. I follow them, I listen to them a lot, and they are a great inspiration for me. Every single day, right? I wake up, and sometimes I even bother them, like shooting them questions, and like, and it happened a lot in the past that I've been like asking them a lot of stuff, and then finally when the book came, I'm like, hey, I need to bring these guys out into the book because they are just really like working towards the same goal, bringing the community together, sharing the knowledge, and really pushing us all ahead. I can give a quick, brief introduction about each guest. So starting, this is an order of appearance in the book. Okay, so that's kind of why they are in this order. And so Luis Madureira is a really insightful guy. He is a business intelligence, competitive intelligence specialist. I met him in Ogilvy in Portugal, and he had developed a whole platform of his own, which now he evolved into this concept of SMINT, which means social media intelligence, and he was doing really like very fast real time insights for lots of their clients there, and using a lot of data to analyze things very quickly and deliver quick insights, and so it's really interesting. It was really interesting to see what he was doing back then, and the speed in which he had his clients get these insights and work on them. Sometimes he was just as an example, he was just so fast that he was like maybe, like 6 months or even more ahead of the competition. He would do things, and then the competition would catch up like 6 months later, and then he would be already doing something else with his clients. So it's really insightful guy, and he brings a little bit of his experience into the book. Then I go into Fred and Alex from Quintly, which are our leaders here at Quintly, and really insightful guys, and they have a very clear understanding of what analytics is all about, what the social networks are doing, where they're going, the ROI around analytics. Lots of times we get stuck thinking about, is it worth it or not? So it's really cool to get their insights from people who created an analytics tool from scratch, right? So this is always great experience, and I always shoot them millions of questions all the time. I'm always like asking them, hey, what are we doing? Where are we going? What's happening? And they bring a lot of those insights into the book. The third guest, Tam Su, he was with Crimson Hexagon, which is a listening tool. It's a very interesting tool. They have some interesting listening features. They're going to image recognition for listening right now, and they're getting really advanced. And he was the product director that kind of moved them towards that direction. And he's really kind of out of the box kind of thinker, and he sees the way people interact with technology in a very unique way. And he's giving a lot of his insights into that, and it's really cool because we can relate that to again the analytics, but our mindset as analysts, as professionals, and the way we interpret the data and things like that. So it's very cool insights. The next guest, Armando Terribili, is a PhD in project management. So he's not in the tech field per se. He's written lots of reference books in project management, which I think is a key discipline for an organization that wants to get this kind of strategic analytics workflow set up. You really need these concepts of project management because that's what project management is all about. It's really about structuring everything so that you can get to this kind of improvement cycle and really understand what is valuable, where is the value, who is driving it, and how to make things better. So he shares a lot with us about the project management side. Then Milan Veverka, he's a very cool guy, and he works with Kibula, and what they do is data integration. So data integration is another huge point, I think, in analytics, especially when we're going beyond social, because we really have to bring together data from all sorts of different areas, not only of our business, but of external data that we're pulling from the market. And Milan brings in and shares details on how to integrate the data, where's the value on that, some use cases that he has done. And Kibul is a really interesting company to follow. They have a cool newsletter, always cool news on data integration and how things are going. He kind of demystifies a lot of the data integration questions that we have. Sometimes we think it's really complicated, and he makes it look a little more straightforward and a little more accessible as it is actually. So it's really cool to follow his lead. And the last guest, definitely not least, is Michael Wu. And Michael, he just left Lithium Technologies, I think last week, and he was a chief science officer at Lithium. And I've been following Michael for years and years, and I've been like, as a fan, I got in touch with him years ago, and he wrote 2 books called the Science of Social, and it's really this guy that thinks way out of the box, not only about social media, but about everything that is out there. So he will make these relations between having a community, which is one of the products that Lithium has, is to build communities for brands. So he will connect, social media to building a true community, and then he goes into AI, into prescriptive analytics, and he brings everything together in a way that is very easy to understand and to see where things are going. So he's a very insightful guy that I always recommend following his content. And so he closes the book in the very end, before we go into kind of like the more advanced part of the strategies.
So Alex, tell me, what do you see coming next, really, in the data world?
So that's a great question, and I think the next step here in social media analytics and analytics in general, I think, is going from the descriptive analytics to what we call the prescriptive analytics, right? So in this graph, which I kind of blew up from the book, and so it's a figure in the book itself. We're going from the bottom left here to the top right, and descriptive is really where we are at in most of the analytics applications right now, right? And then we have this mid stage of the predictive analytics, where we're trying to understand, and start predicting results. But what we really want to get is to the prescriptive analytics, where we have the machine telling us what is the best decision we could be making, right? This is not something easy to get. Like we see TV commercials with IBM Watson these days, making it look like it's very, very simple. And there's like this little box sitting next to me, and telling me things, and it's not really that easy, right? There's a lot of work behind the machine telling us the decision.
I think we're getting there slowly. I don't think we're going to be there overnight, but you see, look at Alexa, right? And Alexa collects data points, right, to understand you, to learn from you, right?
Yeah, and Alexa,
So we're definitely getting there.
Exactly, and these kinds of hardware points, they are genius moves by these companies, because they are exactly that, collecting very valuable data, which will let these companies build intelligence on top of that, right? An example that we have, that it was even given by Michael Wu in one of his webinars about prescriptive analytics, was the GPS. So the GPS is a technology that we all use, and we kind of take it for granted, but it is a prescriptive analytics technology, because it's looking at, okay, we're here, we want to get there, and it's telling us what's the best way to go about getting there, right? So it's
actually a perfect example.
Exactly, that's the best example, I think, that we can relate to. So that's kind of where we're going. We're going to the prescriptive analytics side, but again, we do have a lot of homework while we are in the descriptive side of things, until we can really, kind of get to this point. But in terms of the future, I think that's definitely where we're going.
We're gonna go to the question section now. And Terry just sent a comment through saying, "Stop saying Alexa, you're confusing my echo." It's pretty funny. I have a question in from Joseph. Joseph's asking, does this book require you to have technical skills to implement these strategies?
That's a really good question. So the book is actually trying to not go in that direction. On the contrary, trying to be as non-technical as possible. Of course, when it comes to implementing the strategies, there will be lots of technical steps involved. But if you're working, for example, with certain vendors, the vendors that you're working with, the partners that you're working with, those guys will be a great asset for you to talk to and get that technical knowledge that you might be missing naturally. So it's really something that the book doesn't make it hard for us to understand where we're going, understand what we need, and then when it comes to the exact implementation, and then we have eventually one or two technical questions or something that comes up. Oh, I need to integrate. Then you have some people to ask, and oh, why is this data missing in my social media dashboard? Then you can ask your social media analytics guys what's going on, and you can really listen to those guys, right? I think that's the thing about these partnerships, about this modular approach that I was showing, is that we really connect to these companies that we are working with, and we really trust them and listen to them, and be kind of as close to them as we can, because those guys are doing that kind of thing every single day. We might be worried about selling our products, but those guys are just worried about getting data into the analytics platform, right? So we really need to sometimes step down a bit and trust the providers and find providers that we can trust, and then from there, we can move together with those guys. So the book doesn't get too technical, and that was just like my extra comment there on how to go about
Well,
dealing
we gotta
with the
appreciate
technical.
your motivation here.
Yeah.
Sat down and wrote a beautiful book. Uh, got a question from Anna Marisa, and she says, "Hello. Will this book be available on Amazon?" And by my understanding, and that's where I got it, it is. And it's also available in Barnes and Noble, I believe. Is that correct,
Yeah,
Alex?
yeah, that's correct. So the book is there's A Press is the publisher. It's a major publisher, and they also are part of Springer, the Springer Group in Europe, which is they're huge. So it's a very it's a huge established publisher, and eventually the book will be on stores in many places. But if eventually in your local store the book is not on the shelf, it can be ordered immediately from the counter in your store as well, right? It's readily available, not only
Awesome.
online, of course, on Amazon, but basically every single channel.
That's awesome. And I hope you guys after the webinar do order the book. I'm just going to jump quickly to two more questions here. They're filling up, and I want to make sure that we tackle these and respect everyone's time. I have a question from Samantha. She says, "Hey guys, loving this webinar, so much valuable info." Thank you, Samantha. What I want to know is what processes should be taken to and implemented to pitch these strategies for stakeholder buy-in?
I think that's a really interesting question, and
I
I
think
think
it's a tough question.
it is a tough question as well, and I think the where that starts is basically to kind of look at your own organization first, identify what's going on within your organization, right? Because if you're going to pitch that to stakeholders, what are they worried about, right? So they're stakeholders of what exactly, right? So what are their main concerns? So identify that first and understand what's going on, where are the pain points, and then if you really know, okay, I know this is better because of this, because of that, just really make sure that you can transmit that information to them in a way that they can understand, right? So many times.
But at the same time, I think the vendor you're dealing with, and in this case, Quintly, I think you guys should all check out quintly.com at this point and sign up. It's one of the most powerful analytical tools out there that I've ever witnessed. And Alex knows that I'm a big advocate of Quintly. But in Quintly's case, you would have resources that you could utilize to influence that stakeholder into realizing the importance, first of all, of implementing tools like Quintly. And as Alex said, you really want to focus on the goals, right?
Yeah, that's
Of the organization, of the department, and hone in on the objectives of those goals. One quick question from Warren. Warren is asking, what are the most important metrics to focus on at start?
actually
So
another.
I'm assuming that Warren is not an advanced user.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Like, thank you, Warren, for the question and for mentioning at the start, right? I think at the start is, yeah, exactly what you mentioned, Zach. Maybe he's not using analytics yet. He's thinking about starting, or he's just starting. I think that the metrics that you really want to look at when you're starting should be the ones that make most sense for what you're currently doing. So if you're just starting in social, or if you already have channels with a lot of things going on, that will change a little bit on how to focus on certain metrics. But I think you can do one thing at a time. You can build in terms of checking the interactions over time and details on that, and how often your content goes out, what kind of content
Yeah.
are you putting out, and kind of create this dashboard where you understand, okay, this is what I'm talking about, and this is how it affects the audience.
But we have Luke also asking, in your opinion, do you think the three most social, what are pretty much three most important social metrics?
I think that's kind of a hard one to say, because some it depends.
It matters of the goals, right?
Yeah, and also we have like these two levels of data. The book kind of tackles that a bit. We have a private level where like only us as admins can see, and then we have things like reach and impressions. And then when we relate those kinds of things to the interactions, we have a view of the network, of the algorithm of the network, that we don't have competitively, right? So those sets of metrics are really interesting if we're looking at our own brands. We do want to get those private metrics and relate those to the facts, to what actually happened. So, okay, 100 people saw this content, but how many people interacted? How did they interact it? But we do want to see that projection first, so we
Right.
can understand. And we also want to see how fast these things happen. And we want to try to really get around the algorithm of these networks to try to get the most exposure we can. And then I think a second point is on the public level, where we start doing competitive benchmarking. And then we will not have those kinds of projection metrics like reach and impressions. We can't compare that, but
Yep.
we still need to use that kind of competitive benchmark, because we really want to know how often our competitors are posting, what they're talking about, what kind of products they're doing, what's the creative side like.
And what type of content is working for the
Exactly.
competitor?
So I
Yeah.
think in to answer to Luke's question, I would, instead of like the three main metrics, I'd basically say I would count like two dashboards, right? So we'll have like one dashboard with our own metrics, our private metrics, and I'll have a series of metrics in there trying to tell me about the projection I have within the networks. How is my positioning in those networks? How far am I getting in those networks? And I'll have a little collection of metrics inside that dashboard telling me that, and then I'll have a second dashboard looking out into the competitive market, eventually influencers or whatever external channel I want to check out. And then I'll have like a second dashboard looking at, how do I compare to that? What are they doing that is working? Where should I be going there? So I think these two dashboards would be, I think, the way to go. It's really hard in a process so complex to kind of round things down to maybe one or two or even three metrics. That's kind of always risky as well, because especially when we try to do that, we kind of might be overlooking something that might be really important to our business specifically. So I'm always very careful on pitching like, hey, this one metric. That I do have some metrics that I really love, but those are different conversations, right? We can always like have a chat about, hey, why do you like these
I
metrics?
do have one more question, and it's from Audit. Can we use RFIDs to draft responses of social media? Not sure I understand the question, but you're the expert here,
Yeah, I
Alex.
think that's a really interesting question, Ajit. And I think what he's meaning is like RFIDs are, just so everyone knows, they are, I think, connections, if I understand correctly, connections between, physical spaces into the digital world, right? So RFIDs, sometimes retailers can use it, and companies can use it in the physical space, and they will be digitalized or digitized into the digital world, and populate analytics metrics. And I have seen some experiments where people do have this kind of technology where people use these IDs in the physical world, and then they relate into social. But those would really end up going through some kind of proprietary system, like like a proprietary app, or some kind of proprietary system created by the company that would bring the user, in a sense, into their own universe first, and then identify that user, and then identify the social channels of that user, and then kind of build up the data on top of that to then kind of add the RFID information.
And
And
it's interesting you're saying that, Alex, because the question just came in from Renato that wants to know, how do you deal with consistent changes in the algorithm on social media? And what's the best way to dig through that information, find that real relevant digital information?
yeah, I think that's a great question, Renato. I think I would say two
That's a very
things.
technical question, I think,
Yeah,
but
no, yeah,
it's important.
but the technical part, we can basically, so we can leave the technical part, for example, for more of the technical guys. If we are not a technical guy, I'm not a hugely technical guy myself. I do try to get ahead into the technical world as much as I can, but I'm not a developer myself. But I do rely on my developer friends, and I do reach out to them when I need more information about what's going on, and so I can get the technical information from them. So I think that's kind of part of the answer. One half of the answer is connect to your analytics provider if you are using one. If you're not using any provider, if you're doing things yourself, then just research as much as you can. Try to get into developer blogs, try to get into the technical blogs and read what they're talking, and try to get information from there.
Which
And
is a really tough job, and I recommend you go to
yeah.
quintly.com.
Right, and then the second part of the answer, I think, would be to kind of create certain experiments within your analytics process where you can detect these changes, right? So if you do things in a certain way, and then sometimes that changes drastically, then you can get that as a trigger point and say, okay, something changed right there, and then you can look at that period in time, eventually look at other pages, profiles besides yours, see if that happened to everyone else, and do that kind of thing where you detect certain triggers, and then you focus on that. This is actually an important point to mention, that sometimes analytics is really just pointing us in the right direction. It's really telling us, hey, this is the period you should be focusing on, and then we can spend our time in something that really matters to us. And so, it saves us all this kind of work of going around, like a bunch of things that sometimes are not relevant, by showing us, hey, this is relevant, focus on this, spend half an hour on this, and you'll get answers. And so that's a lot what analytics is about too.
Alex, I really want to thank you for all these insights here, and I want to thank everyone really for joining. I was so excited about this book and to introduce the book and you, Alex, that I actually forgot to introduce myself, which is pretty funny. For those of you thinking, who is this wonderful guy out of Toronto? My name is Zach Radinsky. You can connect with me by email or LinkedIn. It's pretty funny that I forgot to introduce myself, but I think the book is important. As we said, we're gonna send you guys all the deck and the videos, and Alex and I will announce sometime next week the winner after we do this raffle of the book. And I want to give this last opportunity to Alex for any parting thoughts.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, and just reinforcing the introduction there, Zach is a visionary too, guys, and especially content marketing strategy, sales strategy, how to get around this digital world and get something out of very complex situations, complex business situations. Zach makes it simple. So really, reach out to him. He's a very, very cool guy, a partner, long-term partner here.
You can't see me now, guys, but I'm actually blushing. Thank you, Alex.
And yeah, I think in terms of final words, guys, the only thing I would really, really like to say is that the whole idea behind the book is that we get together as a community of thinkers, right? So we all have our own thoughts, and I'm sure lots of things in the book, you guys have thought of it already. You're gonna be like, man, I always think of this, and now Alex wrote about it, but my idea is exactly that, is to get us all together so that we can get those conversations going wherever, if it's in LinkedIn, if it's, if we organize some forum somewhere, if we create our own conventions, whatever we want to do about it, but that we really get out there as professionals and get together and really exchange ideas. And hey, I've been using this, I've been using that, this is working, this is not, how's this working? This exchange is really, really interesting. And my hopes are that the book will be like the central point for all of us, that we can kind of like rely on that as a central point, and then from there kind of start connecting to more and more people in the industry, and really bring all of us, all the organizations, everyone, into a much more like data driven reality, instead of just like wishing to be there. We can always get there together sometime soon. So these are my wishes.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to collaborating with you guys out there and crushing goals with you. Alex, thank you again. And I look forward to actually reading your book for the second time.
Awesome.
You guys have a wonderful rest of your day, wherever you are. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.